Hello, and here we are for day 3 of the Diet Culture Funhouse Challenge. Hopefully, you've been able to take a look at the other recordings if you missed them live and looked at the challenges that we had of trying to look at ourselves through the eyes of God and see how He sees us. And then to pick one healthy habit to do a little work on, whether you feel like you're up to a real challenge or from going forward, or whether you just take a baby step. Baby steps matter. So here we are in day 3, and I'm so glad to have you here with us. Today, we will be talking about, we talked about appearance, we talked about weight and weight loss, and today we're talking about food and eating. This is a loaded topic with lots of feelings and lots of opinions about it. So let's jump in. We may have been hearing, you may have heard lots of different attitudes toward food and been exposed to a lot of different attitudes towards eating. I remember even as an adult going out to a meal with my dad and my stepmom saying to me, you can order whatever you want, but you have to clean your plate. And there are a lot of people that belong to that clean plate club. But is that really what's best for our eating and best for our body? So sometimes yes, sometimes no. One of the attitudes that we hear often in the American culture is food is fuel. We view it like fuel. And again, we talked yesterday about the fact that our bodies are not like machines. If they were like machines, then okay, food could be fuel. But a car, when you put gas in it, it responds to it as gas. There are some things, if a car is running mechanically well, it's going to respond to it ideally. If it's not running mechanically well, it's going to not use it as well. But that's all on the machine. But a machine has no emotion. Our car is not going to go, oh, I'm happy we went to Chevron instead of Quick Stop. The machine doesn't care. It's a car. It doesn't care. Put the fuel in it. It acts like it's fuel. Our bodies aren't machines. Our emotions have a play, excuse me, in how our body responds to food. And food is so much more than fuel. We'll talk in a couple minutes about, God's view about food, because He has one. And it's not just fuel. That's one of the things it does, but that's not all it is. And reducing it to that also reduces our bodies to being viewed as machines, which they're not. Our bodies are miraculous living things to be respected and taken care of. And we do need to fuel them, but there's also more to it than that. There's also in our cultural norms with around food and eating, there is an acceptable amount of food to eat and certain kinds of foods that are acceptable to eat. And we'll get to talking about the results of that in a minute, but just this idea that there are certain portions that are okay, certain portions that are not okay, certain foods that are okay, certain foods that are not okay. And that really tangles things up and complicates things that don't need to be so complicated. Also, because it's so complicated to eat, then we need experts. We need nutritionists and we need diet influencers and various diets. The experts, we need the experts to tell us how to eat, what to eat, when to eat, sometimes even where to eat. We need experts for this because we can't figure this out for ourselves. It's just way too complicated because the body is so complicated, and the nutrition and how it deals with the nutrition from that is so complicated that we obviously need experts to tell us that. I am not saying there's no place for experts with their expertise, but you know who's the expert on your body? You. Because I don't care how many degrees a person has, I don't care how many years of experience they have zero experience living in your body. You have that experience. You're the one that knows. So take the expert's advice and counsel as a consideration, not as a must. So what's the result of these attitudes that we're exposed to toward food and eating? Well, one of them is that most of us, I actually have never met anybody who didn't have a good food, bad food list. We have this list of foods. Kale is good. Cookies are bad. And we assign these foods moral value. If we feel morally superior, if we have a smoothie with kale in it, or a lovely salad with all wholesome, organic, homegrown ingredients, that's morally superior to a ho-ho. Well, food has no moral value in and of itself. It's just food. It's just an option. Now, even some people's religious beliefs have a food and eating code, a health code. They have certain foods and things that they will and won't eat. And even those foods, I would say, it's not a moral judgment. It's if you don't eat pork, it's not because pork is bad food. It's because that's your religious belief. Pork is just another option. For you, it may not be an option you're going to choose because of your religious beliefs. Fine, but that doesn't mean it's bad. The food itself has no moral value. When we have these good food, bad food lists, and when we believe all these food is fuel, there's an acceptable amount of food, kinds and portions to eat, and all of these rules we come up with around eating, or these attitudes toward food and eating, then we're bound to not stick 100% to everything all the time. And therefore, again, it leads to guilt and shame when we don't eat in the way that we think we should be eating. You'll notice so far that all 3 days so far have had these components of guilt and shame. Who wants us to feel guilt and shame? Not our Father. Our Father loves us. Our Savior loves us. They want to encourage and empower us. Now, do they want to help us to make good choices? Yes, they do. Do they want to help us to make choices that are going to make us happy and serve us well? Yes, they do. But shame thrives in secrecy and dark. And Christ said, I'm the light of the world. Our Father and our Savior wants to live in light. So many of these elements of diet culture feed so much into feelings of guilt and feelings of shame. And it runs across a lot of it. There's a lot of study and research done recently on shame and guilt and the impact of those and the reasons for those and the way that they have affected us. And it's just, now guilt has a place, but there is guilt that is healthy guilt, and there's guilt that is useless guilt. And too many of us live in way more guilt than we need to about the choices that we need. So that's something to be very careful about. But the other results is that with all of these varying voices and opinions, there's so much confusion about what to eat. This diet says that eating only plant-based foods is what's best for us. This diet says that no, meat is the focus of this, and then that's where we're going to get our protein. And then look at this on our good food, bad food list. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but there was a time when eggs were viewed as a really good food. And then, wait, more current science came up and said, oh no, eggs have too much cholesterol. We can't eat the eggs because it's not good for our cholesterol. And then more exploration that was done, the more study that was done, they went, oh no, wait, the cholesterol in eggs isn't the bad kind. So one food went not only from the good food list to the bad food list, but then it went back to the good food list. And when things are doing this, when they're going back and forth and all around these lists, and this is the best thing that you can eat, you should never eat this. Oh, well, I'm eating a beautiful, wonderful strawberry. Oh, but it's not organic. That's one of the dirty dozen on the food list. What can we even eat? It's so confusing. So confusing. And you can find just about any food you want. You could find a study that would say that that's a good thing to eat. So what are we supposed to do with all of that? That can lead to fear around food. We're afraid to even make a decision. I don't know. Is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? What's it going to do to me? How am I going to respond? And we just live in this fear of doing the wrong thing and eating the wrong thing. That's a whole lot of energy to hold around something that we have to do every day to survive. Food is not an optional item in our life. We have to have it to survive. So what can we do? What can we do? What's the reality among all of this? There are so many times where fear comes into play, where guilt and shame and confusion come into play, where we're thinking that this food is really, really good, but it might not be particularly good for us. What do we even do here? Well, this is the reality. So let's look at, of course, we know our reality comes from, what does God say about this? So one of the examples that we have in the scriptures of what God's use of food, well, let's put it that way. You may remember the story of Daniel. Yes, Daniel from the lion's den, but he's not going to the lion's den today. This happened in the Old Testament, and it was at a time when Israel had been taken captive. And so Daniel and his friends were young men and were taken into the service of the conquering king. And the person who was had overcharge of these guys was feeding them in a certain way that was culturally the thing to do in that country. Well, it was against the way that the house of Israel was eating, the standards that they ate. And so Daniel went to the head guy, the eunuch over these young men, and said, we don't want to eat that. We don't want to eat that food. We don't want to eat that way. We don't feel it's the right way to eat. We don't want to do that. And we want to eat in this way. Feed us this. And this head of the young men said, I don't know if, I might get in trouble for that. And so Daniel said, just give us 10 days. 10 days, feed me and my friends this kind of diet, and then we'll see if we don't look better, see if we're not doing better. And so this is in the first chapter of Daniel. And verse 15, it says, at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer, fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. So within 10 days, it was like, let's take this challenge. 10 days. And within 10 days, they could see a difference. So the food that we eat makes a difference, but we have to be careful with how we're using it. Daniel approached this food with, this is how I believe, this is what I have been taught is the way to eat and take care of your body. So let's try that. And this story shows that God has uses for food. It's obvious our bodies were designed to eat. He could have designed our bodies to not eat, but we have to have food to keep them going. So another example that we have, or one of my favorite ones in the New Testament, and that really shows that food is so much more than just fuel. And if we just view it as fuel, then we're really missing out. This one is found in Acts chapter 14, verse 17. It says, nevertheless, he, God, left not himself without witness, in that he did good and gave us rain from heaven. That's an evidence of God. And fruitful seasons, the bounty of the earth. Who hasn't been inspired by the beauty and the bounty of the earth? The fact that you can plant a seed and out of it grows food. That's amazing. But listen to this part. He gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling not our bellies, filling our hearts with food and gladness. Do you hear that element of joy? Filling our hearts with food and gladness. Food is not just about function of fuel, put it in your mouth, be done with it. It's not about that. There's an element of joy. There's an element of gratitude. There's an element of, as we come to a healthy relationship with food and with eating, there's a spiritual element to that, an element of joy. And if we just stick to following these good and bad food lists that we have and listening to all the experts and viewing food as fuel and seeing our bodies as machines, we're totally missing that beautiful, enriching, and truly spiritually and physically nourishing element of food and eating. For some of us, it's kind of scary to think about taking that much pleasure with food because we feel like, oh my gosh, if I do that, I'm going to be out of control. I'm just going to eat all the cookies all the time. And let me tell you from experience, that does not happen. That does not happen. Earl has a sweet tooth. once I stopped restricting and said, you know what, I can have the cookies when I want them, I eat much less. Let me tell you a story that I think really illustrates this well. What happens when we slow down with food and actually take time with it? So when I was a kid, we used to go on these cross-country trips. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. We'd go on these cross-country trips. We'd travel halfway across the United States, back in a car, back in the day when there was no videos and no screens in the car to keep kids busy on a cross-country trip. And so my parents had all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. Well, one of the tricks was that to keep food in our mouths. And so once a year, when we'd go on these trips, or every other year when we'd go on these trips, my mom would go to the Hostess store and she would load up on treats that we normally didn't have a lot of. And so this was like, oh man, yes. Well, one of my favorite things that she would get would be the ho-hos and the little, chocolate cake swirled with cream and covered in chocolate. And so I have really fond memories of that. To add to the fond memories of that, I had when my sisters and brothers and I would have this competition to see who could, peel off the chocolate and who could unroll the cake and get the longest piece. And so there's just so many pleasant memories attached to that, and a real strong attachment to Hostess Ho-Hos. Well, as I became an adult, I realized this is not great quality food. It's not super nutrient dense. There's not a whole lot of redeeming value nutritionally to this food. But I would find myself, whenever I was feeling stressed or wanting some kind of a treat for emotional reasons, then ho-hos is what I wanted. And so, and I kept feeling it, but then as an adult, knowing what it's like, oh man, I felt guilty every time I eat them. And so one day I thought, I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna really let myself eat this. I'm gonna take away the guilt, take away the shame, and just let myself enjoy this. I think a ho-ho can have a place in my life. And so I got a package of ho-hos and I broke off the chocolate and ate the chocolate, and I unrolled the cake and the cream and I ate those, and I just took my time really just experiencing that ho-ho. And in this case, you know what happened? I realized I don't really like them. I don't, the chocolate is wax, the cake is stale, the cream is not really cream. It's just, I thought these are really not very good. They don't taste very good. I don't really like them. And from that point on, I had no more, oh, I can't, trying to talk myself out of eating the ho-hos. What I did realize though is that from whenever I would want a ho-ho, I'd know there's something else going on here. It's not the ho-ho I want because I don't even like them. What I want is some other need to be filled. And so it really helped me to do that. Now you might think, oh, well, but you just don't lost that connection with all of those fun memories from when you were a kid. That's not true. I still have those memories. That's still all there. But I just can have all that without having the ho-ho that I don't even really like. So if you're fearful about taking pleasure with food and relaxing the rules that you have, when you can relax your restriction that diets teach us so much to do, to restrict our food, when we can relax that restriction, then we can make actually much better choices. And we take away that, oh, but I want it, but I can't, but I want it. That fight within us is gone. It's gone. We can just make a choice from, will this serve this instance, this purpose, my body, all of the various things that food is meant to do. Is that food going to serve the best in that? And sometimes you're going to eat the ho-ho. Sometimes you're going to have an Oreo. Nobody's going to argue that either of those are health food, but they can serve a purpose. But you can sit down and you can have one Oreo and go, okay, I'm good. It's filled its purpose, and not go, oh, I just need to eat all of these because oh, and we tend to eat really fast when we're eating food that we don't think we should be eating. And so that plays into that stress response that we talked about yesterday. So don't be fearful about losing your food rules, about loosening those restrictions. I can help with that. There are others that can help with that. But trust me, you're not going to eat nothing but junk food if you relax your restrictions on food. You're not going to do it. So there, in reality, like we talked about, we have these good food, bad food lists. There are foods that are more nutritionally dense. That is true, but that doesn't make them morally superior. And there is no good food, no bad food. Food has no moral value. It just is. It's just a thing. That would be the same as saying that my computer has moral value. My computer has no moral value. It doesn't matter what brand of computer I have. The morality is mine with how I use it. The morality is not in the computer. It's not. So it's the same thing. Food is a thing in that regard. It has no moral value. It just is. And again, food is so much more than just fuel. It does, in our culture, fuel is a word that is conflated with food. And there's Claude Raphael wrote this book called The Culture Code that talks about how a culture as a whole is imprinted with any given thing. In the American culture, fuel is the word for food, is the culture code for food. In other cultures, it is perfection. It is community. So there are so many different things that food is and isn't. Our cultural perception, our cultural teaching is not the truth about it. Most likely it's an element of it, but it's not the truth about any given thing. It's our perception of it. Food is so much more than just fuel, so much more than just fuel. And because each of us are different and our bodies are different, there's no one size fits all plan. It's not like this keto diet, that's the best diet. Everybody needs to be on that. Paleo is the best way to eat. Everybody needs to be doing that. No, there's no one size plan for everybody. And the thing is, even in our own bodies, within our own bodies, there's not one size plan that's going to fit for our whole lives. The things and the amounts and the ways that is best for my body now at my current age is not the same as it was when I was a child or a teenager or a young adult. Our bodies needs change. So there's certainly no one size fits all for everybody. There's not even a one size fits all for us throughout our lives. Our bodies are living things and the needs change, and therefore our needs for food and the way our body uses food changes. So our eating habits change, or hopefully do. And then when we buy into the cultural beliefs about food and eating, it can cause so much stress. And when we're in that stress response, things like being afraid of food, being afraid to make some decision about what we eat, or living with that guilt and that shame, being in that kind of confusion, that causes that stress response that we talked about yesterday. That's stress response that triggers those hormones that causes our body to not handle food, not digest food as well as it can. Now, that stress response is the same thing as is the fight or flight response that you've heard about. And what it does is when our body's in that response, it triggers those hormones. And what it does is it deprioritizes digestion, because when we're in a stressful situation, our body needs its resources for other things, not digesting. That gets moved down the list. And so when we're eating, when we're stressed by either guilt or shame or rushing or any number of things that we can be stressed by when we're eating, then it deprioritizes our digestion. And like we talked about yesterday, your body in the same situation, you can be eating the exact same meal and be in a wonderful, relaxed state with eating with friends and super enjoyable. And our body at that point in time, it's like, okay, there's no threat here. And so it can prioritize digestion, which it doesn't do when it's in a stress response. So having this healthy relationship with food and with eating optimizes how our body deals with food and eating. Now also, excuse me, it can help us to better recognize and better listen to our bodies. So that's the reality of it. What are the possibilities? The possibilities, let's pull up this screen here, is that you can learn to trust your body and learn to trust yourself. You can seek the counsel of experts if you want to, but you can listen to those and filter those through what is your own experience in your own body. You can trust yourself. You can learn to trust yourself with food. You can learn to trust your body to let you know what it needs. You can live in this relationship that's much more balanced. You can learn to eat intuitively and not have, and to really learn to, and this is if you're somebody who's been on many, been on and off of diets and been thoroughly inundated and indoctrinated by diet culture, then there's going to be a lot of element of trust, of not trusting yourself and not knowing what to do and having to seek that external input for what to eat. Well, we can learn to eat intuitively where we're turning to internal. We're learning to listen, to tune into and listen to our body's wisdom. And I can help with that. There are other people that can help with that, but that's something that we can relearn how to do, to really eat intuitively rather than by a set of rules. We can have peace with our body and with our food, and we can have joy with body and with our food. How many of us don't have those words in relation to food in our body? We can have that joy, we can have that enjoyment. As we do this, it builds our confidence. It takes our confidence from being based, at least in part, on how we look to who we are. And it can just give us that confidence to walk through the world with confidence, regardless of the size or shape of our body. When we can do that, when we have that kind of confidence, when we have that kind of self-assurance, when we have that kind of peace within ourselves, it not only improves our relationship with ourselves, again, it improves our relationship with other people. We have more space to be authentic with them and to let them be who they are and be on their path. These are some amazing results that can come, amazing possibilities that can come when we learn to have peace with food and with eating. By filtering all of this and trying to have the kind of relationship that God intended. He created our bodies. He created the system that we have to eat and drink. And so therefore, he can help us in that relationship. He doesn't want it to be a stressful one. He wants it to be part of our learning process, part of our growth. He wants it to be a relationship of peace and of joy. And we can do that with his help. So what is your challenge for today with this? Consider, it's a little exploration with your relationship with food. Consider, how do you view food? Do you see it as fuel? Do you see it as fun? Do you see it as the enemy? There's so many views that we have of food. Take a few minutes and go and think about how is it that I actually think and feel about food? And it can be multiple things. It's not just going to be one thing likely. And do you have a good food, bad food list? I'll be surprised if you don't. But think about some things that are on that good food, bad food list. And then, and probably most important of all, so that you know where you want to head, is to think about what would you like, ideally, your relationship with food and your body to look like? How would you want that to be? Because once you can get that picture in your mind, then you know where you want to head. Now, I told you I was going to have some specials for you this week and during this challenge. So I've offered and still offer a free 15-minute phone call, which you can book at Calendly, CALENDLY.com/TLASTLE. So you can book that free call. And then also as part of this challenge, this is for those of you watching the recording later, there's an expiration date on this offer. But if you book through this challenge, then I'm offering a 2-for-1 deal on any of my coaching packages that I offer. So you and a friend can both sign up for the price of one person. So that's obviously 50% off, but because it's 50% off, it's not going to be all the time. So the expiration date on that one is Sunday, September 30, 29, 29th, September 29th. So if you have that initial call by September 29th of 2024, that's the expiration date for this offer. And you sign up with a friend or a stranger off the street. It doesn't matter. There's two of you that sign up at the same time, then you can get that 2-for-1 deal on any of the coaching packages I offer. So tomorrow's our last day. One more element tomorrow. We're going to look at health and fitness, which there's a lot to unpack there as well. Surprise, surprise. Until then, take a look at your relationship with food and see what you can do. See where you are, but most importantly, see where you want to be, because it's possible. All right. That's long enough. Okay.